Hello, everyone. My name is Jordan Farmer. This is the UnCommon Conversations Podcast, episode 19. Today's guest is actually the host of another podcast called the Effective Mindset Podcast. His real name is Mike, and we're going to be talking about all sorts of things, lots of topical stuff, lots of stuff that's in the news right now. Hello. And I think it'll be very interesting for you guys. All right, here he is. So we're going to get into it pretty quick. Mike, you just got to do the request to join in that little camera icon. Yeah, there we go. Comments are going off. Hello,
Hi,
sir.
Jordan. Hi, Jordan. Just Mike. Mike's fine.
Okay. So how you doing? How's your day going, bro?
Living the dream. Actually, had quite a lot of work today going on, with the podcast and everything. But yeah, so far so good. I've been really looking forward to it. So we finally get to sit down together and let's do it. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm very excited for this. Right. It's interesting always whenever I get to talk to another podcaster. Huh?
Yeah, no, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. I was just trying to adjust the brightness. I don't know, for whatever reason, it's a little dark. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I was just I was just saying it's always nice talking to another podcaster, and it's always interesting because you very much had a bunch of things you wanted to talk about, and I really like that you had something in mind. That isn't necessarily always the case, but so I appreciated that quite a bit. And in terms of like how I'm doing, in my personal life, I'm pretty solid. Obviously, things are crazy right now in the world, so I'm a little bit, anxious. We're looking at things. We're in a very serious time. Let me adjust this a little bit. We're in a very serious time, so I have a little bit of low-level anxiety with that kind of stuff. But the only way to solve that, in my experience, has been with work and trying to do something about it to the degree you can, and whatever is beyond your reach, just let it go. So that's what I'm trying to do.
I'd say you're totally on point. The way I see it, and slight anxiety, or however you put it, that's slightly put. I've been dealing with lots of anxiety, lots of headaches, lots of borderline depression over the past year and a half, and really the only way, the only effective way to deal with that, that I found is through trying to work it out. Literally, just rather than trying to sweep it under the rug or whatever, anything like that, it's never going to work. You have to try and break it down into small pieces, and then you have to work it out, as effectively as you can. And if it starts with a conversation, and that's how it usually starts, then I think we're at the right place, right time, right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. Yeah, it's interesting because there were many people who during the pandemic and over the last 18 months have sort of had depression or had lots of things hit them that were new for them. I was one of those few people who was sort of joking about how my lifestyle didn't change with the pandemic, because I've always kept to myself, always been very isolated. Not that I don't like interacting with people. Obviously, I can talk and whatever, and I've had friends. But I like to be secluded. I like to study and just absorb a bunch of information. And when I do talk to people, it's usually with a purpose. It's usually with the, with somewhat sort of not that there's underlying motivations, but like if we're going to talk about our lives, let's actually talk about our lives. Let's not just, fluff it up for the sake of getting through a conversation.
Sure.
And so that plus lifelong depression plus lifelong anxiety issues meant that by the time the pandemic came around, I was sort of starting my slow pull up out of my psychological issues. So I was sort of on the ascendance as everybody else was getting dragged down. And so I kind of felt like I was in the pandemic, but not in the pandemic, so to speak, which is interesting. But yeah, those tools, trying to break things down and piece it together and take it in whatever bite-sized bits you can. That's the only way you could do it. For me, it's been marginal, small, microscopic change day after day after day that just adds up over months and months and months. And, you know, a year, 2 years later, I can look at myself and be like, all right, I've shifted some things up. You know, I actually made some progress. That's kind of how it works for me. So
Straight up. And that's you know, speaking of lifelong depression and anxiety and all that, let's just put it this way: I've had my fair share of struggle, personal struggle, you know, trying to figure things out, trying to find my place in the world and all that. You know, it's we live in a pretty fucked up times. I'm sorry, I don't know if I should be
you can
swearing.
cuss. I don't care about cussing on this. It's all good.
Cool. So you know, speaking of depression, I have been on my way out of that for the past 3 years or so. My darkest moment in my life was when I was 27 years old. I was that was back in 2018. I have literally hit the rock bottom in my life at the time. I ended up on the street, not really having anything going on. You know, I had to start from the very beginning. So that's when I started working on my anxiety, my depression, and all that. You know, taking a different approach, started working on it entirely differently than I have been up until that point. Because up until that point, it was pretty much just trying to run away from responsibility, trying to run away from all of the, you know, all of the chores and all of that, or trying to postpone it till later, till, you know, till I feel better so that I can figure it out and all that. And about that time, shortly after that time, when I got my shit together, you know, when I started getting my shit together, I got literally the most basic job that I could possibly get, just so that I could put together some money, pay the rent, you know, just get my own place. Shortly after that, I discovered Jocko Willink. I'm not sure if you heard of him, but he's
Yeah, I am
literally my
familiar with them.
absolute role model. So this guy, you know, thanks to Joe Rogan, I was, you know, I found out about Jocko and I started listening to him. And this guy has such a hands-on approach. He has such a straightforward approach towards dealing with whatever your responsibilities, which is just get your shit together and be disciplined as you possibly can. And this is what's helping me in life. You know, this is pretty much the key factor to my road to my resurrection, whatever you want to call it, you know, my road back on, back from the bottom onto wherever I'm headed. So in my case, like I said, discipline, that's what really helped me a lot. I have heard some haters talking about, you know, like, oh, Jocko, you know, his techniques, they don't necessarily work for everyone because people would get more depressed if they take on too much responsibility and all that. And I'd say that's just utter bullshit. You really have to accept that that would just be another excuse. An excuse is the last thing that I'm looking for. I'm looking for a solution. And you know, so back to maybe the what I wanted to talk about. Why I started talking about this is because I also, when the whole pandemic started, you know, have been on the way up. Okay, so I've had my darkest moments behind me already. You know, I've learned from those experiences. However, as much as I am pretty much a, you know, I don't know how to put it. I like to spend time on my own a lot. Okay, so that I can do whatever I'm interested in, etc. You know, I'm not. I am a social person, but I'm not extremely sociable, if you will. So you know, so that wasn't really that depressing to me. The fact that I couldn't go out and socialize with people because I don't really do that a lot anyway. I'm way too busy to do that much. So you know, in my case, that wasn't the most depressing fact. You know, the most depressing fact was seeing what's going on around, the blindness of people, or maybe the just, you know, the blatant ignorance of people who, like literally some people's perception just blows my fucking mind. You know, when I think about how could someone interpret what is going on entirely differently. You know, I get it. Maybe, you know, some people would call me a conspiracy theorist and all that. You know, maybe I am going a little bit down the rabbit hole of topics that most people wouldn't want to even touch, you know, with a 10-foot stick or whatever. But I just think that, you know, you have to face whatever is going on rather than trying to turn away from it and see whatever your peers, whatever the crowd will do, because that's the mentality that got us into where we are right now, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think. Yeah, I think you're dead on there. I think that there might be a couple of main reasons why that's happening. One, society sort of runs on trust a little bit, especially societies that run well, and so it's very difficult for someone to question authority without losing trust in the system wholesale. And so there's this sort of like psychological barrier to say, like, the system has to work. Like, there can't be failings of the system because then everything falls apart, right? So they don't even want to look down that path to some degree. And then I'd also say probably, so it's a mixture of our education system that teaches us to be spoon-fed information. So people, including me to some degree, I've seen myself just sitting around waiting to be spoon-fed something when it's my responsibility to go and explore. And again, this is skills in a process: explore, assess, gather what's valuable, sort of digest it, turn it into something good, and then move forward. Like that is a process you have to develop in yourself that doesn't come automatically. And emotionally, and like your sense of yourself can also influence this, your self-esteem. So like if you don't consider yourself a math person, you're not going to spend 15 minutes trying to figure out a math problem. But if your ego tells you you're a math person and you don't figure out the math problem, you're going to sit there till you figure it out. And I'm speaking from my own experience. I consider myself a math person. So I would literally just sit there until I could figure out a math problem. I sit there for 15 minutes till somehow, some way, it just got to me. I got to the answer, even if I didn't understand it initially. Whereas with English and books and writing, just getting started a little bit on it was just a giant chore. And it's not that it was skills or anything that was really related to why it was such a chore. It was that it was my identity and my sense of my own abilities within that, and the lack of confidence that I was operating with. And it's not even like confidence in any serious sense. It's just like, it's writing, bro. It's just writing. It doesn't, you could just vomit words onto the page and see what happens. It doesn't have to be perfect before you execute it the first time. You could just start getting the reps in and bring your game up gradually, right? Like better to sell, like if you have a sales job, better to make 15 grand selling this year, 30 grand selling next year, and 45 grand the next year, as opposed to take 2 years to study, go into debt, and then start making 45 grand a year. Like, you're better off developing the skills of building it up. And like with social media, I've seen the same thing for me, where like I'm learning slowly how to organically kind of grow my own social media. And so as I once I hit a certain level, then it's going to carry its own momentum and stuff like that. So that's helped. I know I kind of jumped across things there.
No. Look, I think you've actually mentioned pretty good topics here. First things first, maths. Okay, I am absolutely the other way around, which is quite funny because for the past 6 or 7 years, I used to work as an accountant, or let's say, in accounting on various different levels. Either way, cut the long story short, I figured out as the time went that it wasn't really for me. I still am doing a little bit of that work every now and then, just so that I can put some money in my pocket. But end of the day, this is definitely not something that I want to focus my future on. So
not a very like meaningful job. It doesn't, you're not going home every day feeling rewarded by your work, so to speak. It's good work, it's necessary work, but yeah,
definitely not fulfilling. Definitely didn't give me that kind of satisfaction. Sure, it would pay better than other jobs that I've done, and I've done all kinds of work in the past. I've done physical work, I've done some warehouse gigs, the only things that I haven't done are a driver's job or anything like that, because I don't drive at the moment. But accounting, why did I get into it? And why am I even talking about it? I got into it because I was tired of physical work. I was like, this isn't really for me. I'm not a very physical person. I like to exercise, but that's, outside of work. I like to work with my head if I can. So there were a few options I've done. My very first job ever was in sales. in telemarketing, so cold calling people. You know, I had absolutely zero skill. I was 18 years old. I was totally shit at it. So you know, so I was like, oh, this is definitely not the best idea to get back into that. So as I was about 23, 24 years old, I started doing some, you know, basic accounting work, such as processing payments, etc. And I realized one thing, that I am quite good with numbers. I am awful with maths. Okay, so when it comes to like mathematics in school, I was really bad at that. I would always get an E or an F or you know, a D at the very best. And when it comes to the accounting work, I had to take on a different approach, because I was like, okay, look, I am definitely not going to do the physical work for much longer because I don't want to do it. I am definitely not going to do sales. What else is there? And you know, this accounting work seems pretty interesting. But for someone who is good with languages, for example, English is my second language. I started speaking English about 10 years ago, you know, like really badly. Still, you know, I still have a long way to go, but I would say I'm getting there. So, you know, so I'm much better with languages than I am with maths. So my approach was to literally try and implement how I learn languages into how I learn mathematics. And you know, the most effective way I found is literally break it down to the point that a 4-year-old would be able to work it out if they only knew the maths, you know. So do it as simply as I possibly could. Don't try and confuse myself. Don't try and make it sound complicated or look complicated, because after all, what the job is about is trying to translate complicated data into something that anyone outside of a finance function would understand. So that's pretty much, you know, the job in a nutshell. And in order to do it right, I had to start looking at maths as if it wasn't maths, as if it was just another problem to solve. So how do I solve it? How do I figure it out? And there's always a way to figure it out if you're only willing to do that. So yeah, that's what I want to talk about. That's what I want to say about maths. I forgot what you were saying. Moving forward. I'm sorry.
No. I was just sort of talking about how like, one, if you just work at something, like, you can get better at it, and
Yes,
your set, like, your views and your confidence of surrounding something affect how easily you can do it. Like, if you like for most people, sitting and thinking about a math problem for 15 minutes like just might sound like a giant chore, and I did it willingly because it was fed from my curiosity. Like, I found the right way to sort of to approach it, I guess, and that was because of the narrative I had constructed around math and everything in my own identity. But I wanted to talk about, because you had mentioned that. So where are you from originally? What languages do you speak, and how did you come to the U.S.? I'm assuming you're in the U.S.
No.
Or the UK, sorry, UK.
Yes, I'm in England. I got here 10 years ago, specifically in May. So yeah, it'll be about 10 years now, and just a little bit. I'm originally from Poland. I've spent most of my life there as a kid. When I was 16, my mom took me to Canary Islands for about 10 months, and I was like, you know, that's when I first got a little hint of what it's like to, you know, of what it's like to experience different culture, to what it's like to see happy people out on the streets, because Poland is a dark place, you know, as much as it's a beautiful place to be, to go on holiday or whatever, you know, it's quite a hard place to be, to live there on a daily basis. For the most part,
is it a somber culture, so to speak? Like, very,
that's what I was
people are not.
You know, people are extremely narrow-minded, and I am not trying to marginalize or anything like that. I'm just saying, you know, the overall mentality of a Catholic person, okay, because that's a majority, you know, of Poland is an hardcore, old school Catholic country, okay. So you know, very intolerant towards diverse cultures, etc. Quite intolerant towards minorities, you know, and that includes gay people and all that. I was just like, I couldn't deal with that shit. I was like, why should I be concerned about someone's sexual preferences if I'm just having a pint with them, or you know, if I'm just if we're just having some conversation or whatever, or if I just see that person on the street, and I know a lot of people who would say like, oh, you know what, hey, this guy's this and that. I'm not supposed to even talk to him because, you know, we don't do that kind of thing. To me, it was just like all that petty bullshit. I was like, you know what, I cannot put up with that. I lived in Tenerife for 10 months and it was awesome. You know, people were happy on the streets. Literally, when you go to a grocery store, for example, in Poland, even though I lived in a major city, I lived in Krakow, which is the second biggest city in Poland. You know, if you go to a grocery store, most of the people, when you look at them, will look at you as if like, what the fuck are you looking at, dude? Where you got a fucking problem? You know, the sort of attitude that
machismo, aggression, disagreeable, like
rather disagreeable, and you know, and definitely unpleasant. And I was like, why should I be putting up with this shit? Like, I know that there are places out there where you can just get on with your life, do whatever you want to do. You know, you can hang out with good people. If you come across someone who isn't the right person to be around, you know, then you just move on and you know, and continue striving to live as well as you can. Whereas in Poland, it's much more of a struggle rather than striving, you know. So that's what got me to change environment. So I literally got out of there when I was 20. I moved to England, and I was pretty confident that, you know, that my English is really good because I watched some movies with subtitles, and I was like, yeah, I can pull it off, I can handle it. So the hard truth hit me immediately once I got here. I got here first over to my mom's. You know, I've stayed at her place for about a week or so. Got myself a job. I remember up until now the embarrassing moment when I first got into a recruitment agency, and I said, I literally walked in and I was like, good morning, I look work, hard worker, anything, you know. And then they were like, obviously they all cracked a little joke and all that, and they politely said to me, look buddy, we'll call you, which in other words, you know, means get the fuck out of here, we don't want to deal with you and all that. So I was like, okay, this was so embarrassing and this was so uncomfortable and this was such a horrible experience that I don't want to, and I know that I will, you know, moving forward, experience it for probably many years to come, right? But that is something that I want to experience as little as possible. So what am I going to do about it? I'm not going to go to college and learn the language or whatever. So I literally got myself a Netflix subscription. I got myself a Spotify subscription or whatever, you know, the music service at the time. And I started watching movies. For example, American movie with, or like English movie, whatever, with, you know, English subtitles so that I could hear both the pronunciation and see the spelling of the word. And that way, if I didn't understand the word, that I would just pause it, Google it up quickly on my phone. Okay, I know what the word means, so I can give or take, put together a sentence and try and figure out what they're on about, you know. That turned out to be pretty effective because that's how I learned my English for the most part, I would say. People get always confused about the accent. They're like, oh, so which part of the States do you come from? Or like South Africa and all that. I heard all sorts. And that is mostly due to the fact that I have learned my English watching movies. And most of the movies, you know, most of my favorite movies are made in USA. So, so yeah, so that's how I got there. And yeah, that's it. That's me in a nutshell, you know. Yeah, Poland for 20 years and then 10 years happily living here. Although my destination point is America. I don't know how long it will take me to get there, but I really hope one day I will.
Yeah. The ideally, you know, at some point we'll get our stuff together, and everyone that wants to come here can at the right time. The only thing is, the only limitation, and if we got our economic policies in order, it would sort of remove the limitation. But if you have, you know, 10 million jobs, and we have 10 million job openings right now, so like now is sort of a good example of this. But if you have 10 million jobs and you have 10 million people, and you bring in another million, you now have 1 million unemployed people. But as the jobs keep going up every month, we create 200, 300,000 more. Those are families and you know, lives that can be supported through those means. And what happens is, If it goes too fast and you have too many people too quickly, that is, supply and demand, too much supply of labor. So businesses can fire you and hire someone else for cheaper, or
which
you
is
lower your
very
wages
bad
and they'll take someone
outcome.
else. But on the opposite side, if you have more jobs and less labor, now businesses have to go to other businesses and try to get you to leave that business and come work for them by paying you more. And so that's sort of the two sides of labor scarcity. And so if we had labor scarcity the right way and all the other policies fixed, which is, it takes a long time to get through all that. I have a 64-minute video on YouTube fixing all economic policies across the board, and it's a lot to get through, but it's a thorough piece. We could get up to probably like 3, 4, 5, 6 million jobs created every year, which would mean 10, 15 million immigrants every year that could come in and be supported. And I'm definitely in favor of all freedom-loving peoples being brought in, because you want as resilient and strong a free United States as possible. So it makes
Very
sense to
much.
try to bring the freedom-loving people of the world together. I wanted to say something about Poland. It's interesting because Poland, more than any other country sort of in Europe, is both anti-PC in some ways, like against sort of the rest of the European sort of,
Yeah.
left-wing liberal sort of side of it. And they also experienced Nazi Germany, obviously. So they understand freedom, and they also understand sort of the excesses of whatever. But there's a difference between that and having a culture and a philosophy of freedom for your society. And that's the difference between sort of the American approach versus many other approaches, where like we're Christian in many ways and conservative, but
Yes.
open and loving, because it's about freedom and it's about you living your life. And as long as you don't harm anyone else, what is it to me to try to dictate anything about your life? Like you harm someone, you don't pay your taxes, whatever, then we have issues. But beyond that, what is it? Why should the government be involved in those kinds of things? And more importantly, why should I hate you for any of those things? Why should I be hung up on any of those things? So it's anyway, so I'd like to see that kind of culture and philosophy adopted outside of the United States more so than it is. I feel like we attempt to have it as pure as possible, and we don't always get it. But there's lots of other countries that just don't take freedom as seriously. I
Well,
don't know
look, I
why,
live,
but they don't.
I live in England, like I said, and and here, England is also very PC. And just to clarify things, I
Mm-hmm.
am all about freedom and all that, and I am extremely tolerant. Like I said, I really don't give a shit about your preferences and all that. Do your thing, whatever floats your boat. Whatever makes you happy. Do your thing, as long as you don't get in other people's way. Then literally do whatever. However, I am definitely anti-PC. Okay, I am definitely not on board with all that preposterous woke bullshit, and I think that's what the US gets wrong. So when I say that I would like to live in the US, I would love to. And since I was a little kid, pretty much everything that I remember from my childhood had something to do with the American culture, because it was always on TV, because it was always in the books, it was always everywhere, and that was always the promised land. That was always the place that you wanted to go. And I'm not talking about just the big cities and all that, because obviously, for example, what's happening in Los Angeles right now is an absolute catastrophe. With Gavin Newsom in charge. I don't even know where to start with that cunt. But but honestly, the way I see it, the U.S. as a country, with with all the land, with all the landscape, with everything where you can go, all the places that you can visit, it's a giant continent. It's a giant place. The United States alone are such a monumental place that you could really find whatever you're looking for, I think.
Yeah. Yeah,
In these
Europeans can
days.
appreciate this, and you can appreciate this. So most people in society around me probably wouldn't drive more than an hour to go date someone or to go on a date with someone or anything like that. And obviously, from England and everything, a 12-hour drive in a straight direction, that's a long distance, right?
Sure.
Me and my girlfriend were 6 years into a relationship now. When we started out, for the first 14 months, it was a long distance. And this sort
14
of ties
months long
into the,
distance. How'd you pull that off?
about 50,000 miles or whatever, 75,000 kilometers on my car is, or yes, yeah, 75,000 kilometers on my car is how I did it. About that in the span of 14 months. Every 3 weeks. So I had a four days on, 3 days off schedule. So every 3 weeks or so, I try to go out there. But anyways, I just wanted to tie it to this broader point. I drive from California to Utah, which is where lots of people that are Mormon or in that Latter-day Saints church live in the United States. I'm not a member of that church, but I just so happen to be going there. She just so happened to live there. And I drive 12 hours straight on one freeway, 630 miles straight with a little bit of extra, before and after. And that gets you about 1/6 of the way across the United States. You could go for 72 to 80 to 90 hours straight in a straight line across, and that's how long it would take you to get there without any breaks or gas stops or anything like that. So the
You blew
and
my
the and
mind.
so and again and again, so I dated someone. Now we grew up near each other within like 30 minutes of each other. So we knew each other from then. So it's not like I plucked her out of obscurity 12 hours away, but we had a relationship 12 hours away in the United States because it was all free, open. There's no borders between all the countries. There's no processing. You just drive, you know? So
Awesome.
yeah, the United States is huge, and I want to explore the United States, and I'm here,
That's
like
it. That's what
that
I'm
is
talking
how
about.
big it is. It's literally the size of the European Union plus a little extra, you know?
And that's what makes it so great. And really, when you think about why am I talking about why I would like to live there? Obviously, there are pros and cons, and one con that I could think of is the government at the moment. Who's in charge? It's an absolute disaster. Everyone who's got two brain cells that communicate with each other knows that there is an absolute disaster going on right now, and it's not. It's
Of
not
the
good.
people that are paying attention, yes. The problem is
Yeah,
not
of the
everybody
people
is
that
paying attention.
sure. But so Biden and Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, I don't even know what she's doing there, because really I haven't really seen her much in the media or anything like that. Even though I do follow all of them as much as I possibly can. Try and see as much what is going on as I possibly can, because it is not just the U.S. Okay, if it was no offense to, for example, Azerbaijan, but if it was the government of Azerbaijan or New Guinea or whatever, I don't even know if I pronounced that right. If it's a government of Poland, it doesn't have a global effect. Okay, it doesn't affect
Mm-hmm.
the global economy, the politics, and all that. But in case of the United States does something, and then the world follows. Okay, or let's say the United States implements some policy, and then the world, it does affect the world in one way or another. The world will
Yeah.
usually follow with their policies, etc. So that's where we have a little bit of a problem, because obviously what is going on right now in Afghanistan, and what is going on with the politics, in general, with all the policies that Biden is implementing. It is affecting not just the U.S. but also the countries that are participants in whatever the U.S. has going on. What I think is a good thing, and that's where I was going with this, the why I would like to live in the US. For the most part, it comes down to freedom. In England, you are supposedly free. Okay, they say that you get your freedoms here and all that. True, but where are the guns? And I'm not saying that I'm some fucking psychopath who wants to shoot people. I'm just saying, what if I want to carry? What if I want a concealed carry firearm, so that I can protect myself from criminals? Okay, England has, I think, the biggest in the world problem with knives, with knife crimes. I don't know if I get it right, but I know that knife crimes are a giant problem in England. Okay, and I personally know 2 or 3 people who were robbed at a knife point. I am not exaggerating this. I used to hang around quite a well, let's say I used to hang around some people that you'd not necessarily want to hang around back in my day. So you know, I've had my fair share of fuck ups, and I used to hang around people who would often get in trouble. And you know, as much as I think, you know, you have to be quite irresponsible to get yourself in a situation where you are being robbed at a knife point. You know, back in the day, that's what I thought, that, you know, only morons get in that kind of situation and all that. No, it is actually not the case in here. You can just be coming back from a grocery store or whatever, and some asshole will run up to you with a knife or with a fucking machete, and he will just say, give me all you got. What are you going to do in that case? You are going to either try and run away, and this might end really badly, or you are going to just give him whatever you got and pray that he's not going to stab you with that knife. You know, situation would change dramatically if concealed carry was a legal thing in England. You know, in here, you cannot even carry a bloody air rifle or anything like that, air pistol or whatever, pellet gun. You know, you can't even have that. So where's the common sense? This is my problem, that the government that is taking away your guns, the government that has restricted our right, that has taken away our right to defend ourselves in this country, is defending itself with firearms, with armed guards. Okay, when you go to London, where to Downing Street, where Boris Johnson is, you know, our lovely prime minister, that cocksucker, where when you go there, that asshole is surrounded by guards who are carrying automatic rifles, right? Whatever you want to call them, machine guns, MP5s. I don't know. I'm no expert, you know.
In Washington D.C. after January 6th, they brought in 24,000, you know, troops with guns and stuff.
Troops,
but obviously,
yeah, we're talking
obviously
military.
you're talking about England, but yeah.
So yeah, so you know, so that's exactly my problem. That people that how can you not see the hypocrisy? You know, like how could so many people be? How could so many people say that, you know, this is actually a good thing that we don't have guns here, because you know, if we had guns, people would just be recklessly shooting each other. No, this is not Grand Theft Auto. I think the best example of the, you know, concealed carry or whatever, you know, the right to bear arms actually working is Texas, I think, Alabama, you know, places where you can carry a gun and everybody's polite, everybody's nice. As far as I know, Austin is one of the best places to be, because everybody's polite. Because, like, how the fuck should I know if this guy that I'm just about to have a, you know, face off with or whatever, how do I know that he doesn't carry a gun and he's not going to point it at my head? So everybody's polite, like, oh, hey, hello, okay, I'll get out of your way, you get out of my, okay, I'll get out. No, you first, you go first. And here it's like, get out of my way, asshole, you know. And it's like, but you don't think twice, and then it turns out that the guy has a knife. That's my problem, you know. That's my problem.
So there's like sort of two interesting pieces here, because I've been doing some of this research myself lately, because I did a video on the Second Amendment and gun control and all that a long time ago, and I uploaded it recently on my YouTube channel, and I was sort of readdressing the topic. I looked up the first off, I looked up the 7 deadliest cities in the United States. States. So by the 50 states, the 7 deadliest, the 7 safest, the 7 highest with gun control, and the 7 lowest with gun control. And when I looked, there was no correlation between any of it. Like there were high gun control states that were safe. There were low gun control states that were safe. There were dangerous states that were on both sides of it. So like the danger of the society and the gun control were two separate sort of things going on. None of it sort of tied into anything else. And this is where you can talk to your fellow UK, England, your fellow Englishmen and fellow UKans or whatever you call them out there, so about 35,000 people a year are killed by firearms in the United States. About 35,000.
35,000.
About 2.5 million people are saved from criminals, but with guns. That's the statistic no one knows about. So about 100 times as many people are saved by guns as are endangered by guns or killed by guns. So
But of
that
course,
so
the
that's how
mainstream
you
media is not going to tell you that, right?
yeah.
I'm sorry that
Well,
I'm pausing you for a second,
exactly.
but
That's how you control the narrative. If you only ever ask the question, how dangerous are guns? That's a negative perception. If you ask how many lives do guns save, that's a positive thing. What good is it doing versus what bad? And so if you only talk about the bad, you're going to have a bad. So that is my going forward going to be my sort of argument. 100 times as many people are saved as are harmed by guns. And so they're a net good, obviously. And like you said, in
absolutely.
some cases, you stop crime when you have a gun as a citizen, and yeah,
Look,
and gun control
does
doesn't seem to do anything.
absolutely not. It not only it doesn't do anything, it makes the situation worse because a criminal will figure out a way to get a hold of a gun. Okay, he will get into possession of one, and in that kind of situation, that only makes things much worse. Just like with war and drugs and everything else, it's like I'm not saying decriminalize fentanyl because that's, you know, nobody wants that. What I'm saying is, with guns, if you try and implement gun control, whatever, or let's say an absolute ban on guns, okay? Because I think this is what they're trying to do in the US right now with gun control. That they're trying to, you know, to do. They still allow people, certain people, to have a gun, whatever. But a vast majority won't be able to get that. Like, for example, in California, I think, you know, that's probably one of the strictest laws. Like, California probably has some of the strictest laws when it comes to, you know, when it comes
Yeah,
to the gun.
California, New York,
I don't know about
I think
Illinois.
Vermont. Yeah,
I don't know how Chicago is doing with that. But I do know
as a
that
city,
Chicago.
Chicago is as a city, Chicago is one of the top ones for sure for gun control. Yeah, and there. So here's the thing,
And
like
one of the worst when it
to
comes
your
to, you
point
know,
about the
the.
criminals.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
Go on.
if you're poor, let's say you're going to rob someone, you have a gun or whatever, you're going to rob someone because you're poor, right? Well,
Hmm.
if you're poor, you don't have food, you don't have somewhere to stay. If you get arrested, you get food, you get somewhere to stay. So like your life's even better if you do the illegal thing. So it's not like they're afraid of being in jail. It's not like they're afraid of doing that. If you're in that kind of a situation where you're willing to, you know, have a gun on someone and do something like that, for sure you're not going to care about buying an illegal firearm or whatever. And to your point, you can still get a knife and still try to kill someone, still try to rob them or whatever. So it's not like you're helping save anyone by taking away this right. And in the long run, you know, with Nazi Germany being the best example, Australia, what's happening right now in Australia being another example, when they take
Australia,
away the guns to some
disaster.
degree, like that means the government can get away with a lot more before the citizens can actually rise up. Better example, Cuba. You know, we don't even talk about Cuba anymore because of Afghanistan and all the stuff. But there were protests and citizens were getting shot down by the government in Cuba
Yes.
because they
Yeah.
don't have guns. And the people that are protesting in Cuba they're only doing that because they're strong enough or courageous enough to say I might die and it's still worth, you know, libertad. It's still worth, you know, for liberty. It's still worth standing up even against someone who has a gun when you don't. So
Well, that's
so
pretty much what's
it
happening.
makes a difference, man. When that day comes, when the shit hits the fan, having guns when you're a citizen makes a big difference.
And you know, I think this is also, you made a good point here. It's like, you know, with protests, okay, people go out on the streets to protest. They, I think many of them do realize that they might, I'm not talking about Cuba because Cuba is quite extreme, okay? What's going on there with, you know, police shooting citizens, that's just fucking preposterous to me. But you know, the way I see it, in London, for example, you go out to a protest. Nobody expects that the police will start beating you up with batons or whatever, you know, that they will start throwing gas at you or anything like that. It happens, okay? And what's happening in Australia is absolutely inexcusable, in my opinion. You know, the with the tyranny, with the absolute abuse of emergency given authority, because the you know, the powers that the police were given in Australia over the past year and a half are only due to the pandemic, right? So
Mm-hmm.
obviously lockdown. Yeah. Well, look, you know,
Well,
I am
it's
never
like
ever.
if you compare. So if you compare the deaths from Delta, the new variant, compared to the old flu, it's the same.
What happened
It's
to the
basically
flu?
just a bad flu now. And then,
My
well,
my.
so what happened was is this is
No,
just
no.
a
What
well. So what
happened to the
happened is
flu?
this is a new flu, so it outcompeted and outspread the other flus. So it's
Where is
still
the flu?
flu deaths in
What?
some sense,
Why
but
is
it's still
no
gone
one?
up a little bit.
Why is no one on the planet reporting any flu cases whatsoever? As far as I know, flu has been eradicated. It has been totally obliterated by the COVID.
The best answer to that is because they started getting paid more if they
Of
say
course,
it's a
the
COVID
incentive.
case than if it's just a regular flu case. And if it doesn't make a big difference in the end, if this does seem like a regular flu and not exactly COVID-19, you could still get that extra 2 grand or whatever you get paid. You know, I don't know what the National Health Service in the UK pays in terms of COVID care versus others, but here in the US, the emergency packages and everything they came out with put a
Big
bunch of money
difference.
out there for that stuff. So I know
Yeah.
it's about $2,000 from what I looked at. If hospital reports it as COVID-19 versus other similar diseases.
I heard that there was some giant differences between, you know, the big difference between what you would get, as in like what a hospital would get for a normal admission versus a COVID admission. And I actually heard about tens of thousands of dollars. So like $10,000 or whatever, or 20, probably not 20, but it was like going upwards of 10. So even $2,000, okay, per patient, per one
Mm-hmm.
admission. Imagine, like, you know, imagine what was
If
going
it's
on. Like,
500,000, that's
exactly.
whatever, two
So
million bucks right there.
so there's the, you know, so there's one answer to what happened with the flu. Obviously, I'm being a little sarcastic because I have a pretty good idea of what happened to the flu, uh, and
Yeah, yeah.
what happened. Like, I don't know how deep you went down the rabbit hole of the whole PCR and all that, you know. And I,
A little bit, not too deep.
so
But
I'm not here.
I know that the accuracy of the PCR tests aren't very good compared to
So
other tests. And there's lots of
for
false
all I
positives.
for all I know, and the reason why I mentioned it is because the guy who invented the PCR test died of pneumonia, which is quite suspicious in the US, especially. Very, very shortly prior to the outbreak in what was it, November 2019, right?
Yeah,
The first.
that's the so it was sort of January, February, March where America started waking up to it. But yeah, late November, mid-November 2019 is
I think that was
so the geneticists or virologists that I looked into looked at the patient zero being around November 2019 of this particular bug.
so there you go. So the guy who invented it very shortly before the outbreak of the whole bug, he died under quite mysterious circumstances, given that he was very strongly advocating against using the PCR test for detection of any viruses or infections, because he said this test is purely not designed for that. And if you, and the test is done in the way that, again, I'm no rocket scientist. If I start talking science, then I'm gonna sound like a fucking idiot. So so give me a little break here. But I'm just gonna tell you, you know, from the top of my head how I remember it. So as far as I remember it, you can tune or whatever, like set, amplify whatever the test, so that it, whatever it detects, whatever you're looking for, okay, whatever you set it to detect, if it detects a tiniest particle, or let's say, like, you know, like a fraction of what you're looking for, that would the amount that is absolutely insignificant. Let's say you have some 1 or 2 flu particles in your lungs that would never ever make you ill, because your immune system doesn't even recognize it as a threat. It's just those two are just, you know, flying around there. The PCR test spots one of them, and then it starts multiplying that result up until the point where it reaches whatever your target is, where you set it, you know, like, okay, let's set it here. It starts multiplying it till it reaches that point, and then you get a positive result. So you make whatever you want out of that. It's just, you know,
Yeah.
I
So
just,
I think the best, it's not even a metaphor because this is kind of literally what they're doing. But basically, what the difference is a petri dish. If you have a petri dish, you put something in it and you wait a week, it'll grow to a certain
yes, sir.
size, and then you
Yes,
could
sir.
detect stuff. If you wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month, well, then it's grown a whole bunch more. Then you can detect more of the smaller initial bits. So that's kind of my understanding of how they can manipulate the PCR test and how accurate it is or how sensitive it is by just allowing more cycles of this sort of
Exactly.
stuff in order to see if there's anything in there.
And that's, you know, that's the main issue that I had from the day one with this, because I remember very, very early, it was probably March or April. I'll get there in a second. Let me just say something so that I can get there, so that what I'm saying makes a little more sense. Okay, so when I started doing my podcast, I was literally pissing out of my ass. Okay, I just started doing it because I was like, I'm just frustrated with the shit that's going on. It was prior to the pandemic. I wanted to do it for a while, and I was still doing my office, you know, 9 to 5 job, you know, on a daily basis. I just started recording on my phone. I was doing it at home, just talking to myself. Like I was like, okay, let's make it my little self therapy, okay, like my little personal shrink sessions with myself. So I started doing that. Then the, you know, when the whole situation with COVID started happening in March, you know, when they started imposing the first lockdowns and all that, I started looking into it because I was like, okay, this is frustrating, you know, the fact that there is something going on, I don't understand it, so it pretty much qualifies to my podcast. Okay, if it is frustrating to me because I don't understand what's going on, then I'm going to try and break it down to pieces. I'm going to try and analyze it. This is what I learned from you know, from people smarter than I, to do, in case I'm confused, in case I'm stuck in a moment, in a situation, whatever, and I don't know how to deal with it. I need to try and work it out from you know, just break it down to pieces and work it out from the ground up, if you will, you know. So I got to the point of analyzing whatever the PCR means, and I have come across that interview where Kari Mullis, the guy who invented the PCR tests, was talking about it. And it was a few years ago. I don't know if the interview was from like 10 years ago or so, whatever. But I know that it was nothing new. It was nothing fresh, and the guy was already. I think that was going back to the one of the previous viruses, the SARS one or whatever, maybe Ebola, something. I totally don't. I don't want to butcher it further, but I don't remember which virus it was. I just remember that the guy was saying back then. He said, "This PCR test, it is not designed to detect viruses. Please do not use it for that, because if you will use it for that, then you will get a false result, because the test will show as positive, but it's not going to mean that it is positive, because it just spotted something and it just amplified, multiplied it, whatever, you know." And they did it regardless. And how is it that the guy disappears off the surface of the planet 2 months, very, very conveniently, 2 months prior to the, you know, outbreak? So all that to me, and again, this is going a little down the conspiracy theory area, but you know, but call me whatever you want. Like this has been bothering me for the past year and a half, and right now, where we are, you know, the place we're at, I think we have a long way to go. The damage has been catastrophic, you know, in terms of what happened to the businesses, small businesses. I have friends who will never recover from that, in terms of whatever happened to their businesses. They have to go back to working for somebody else, where they had their own self-employment going on, and you know, they were pretty well off. All of a sudden they have to go back and work at a grocery store, and you know, and obviously no offense to anyone who works at a grocery store, but I have a friend who
But for
literally,
those people, it's a step back.
it's a giant step back. You know, when I know a guy who was a couple of years older than I am, and he had his own little business going on. All of a sudden, he has to go back to working at a grocery store, and they get rid of him 2 weeks later, and he's like, so shit. So now I don't have any job at all. Now I have to go to a warehouse and whatever. And it's like, you are literally, you know, you were doing pretty well, but you were still, you know, at an early stage, or let's say whatever, you know, so quite overdrawn, quite in debt, you know, with the bank, with a business loan, whatever. But everything was going well as long as it was going, because you were able to pay your, you know, installments, whatever. You were able to pay for your car, you were able to pay your bills, and the money was coming in. And all of a sudden, you have to shut down, because if you don't, they will arrest you. And all of a sudden, all of the orders go, you know, 300-400% down. So you're unable to pay your bills, and all of a sudden you have to close. And not everyone got the, you know, government's incentive to help and all that. I get pretty fucked over myself when I was when the whole lockdown started, because I was still working for a local government, actually, as an accountant, and I was a contractor there, so I wasn't self-employed. I was employed by the recruitment agency, whatever, that, you know, that got me the job. That they had a contract with the council for which I was working. But cut the long story short, the day of the outbreak, the council decided that they're going to cut all of us off, all of the contractors, because, you know, we cost them a lot more money than a normal employee would, because we only do a, you know, short-term temporary project work, whatever. So they were like, okay, this is a giant expense for us, so let's just cut it totally. So they totally cut us off, and from working for a local government where I thought, you know, this is pretty solid, you know, this is a pretty stable job, I'm pretty good, even though I'm just a contractor, no way on earth that anything could happen, that they would all of a sudden not need me for the job because they need someone to do the job. All of a sudden, turns out that the people working for the local government, the contractors, were the first to go with absolutely zero support. So we had something like furlough scheme here, which is like, you would, if you were working for a business for longer than 3 months at the time of the pandemic, then you would qualify for furlough, which is 80% of what you were making. You would get that paid by the government. So you do sacrifice a little bit, but you still get 80%, and you stay at home until they figure the shit out, you know, until they, whatever they got to do with the pandemic, until they get you back to work.
Until they say it's over.
Yeah, till they say it's over. That's a good one. But yeah, let's say, you know, till they tell you to go back to work, you are paid by the government. You get 80% of your wages or your salary, whatever. So you're pretty good, you know. So I was like, okay, I can live with that, you know. It's a little less money, but I can handle. I can, you know, manage. I can pay my bills. I'm gonna be all right. All of a sudden, turned out that the council is not willing to pay for that, because the government said, well, council is the government. It's the local government, right? So it has the funding. If it is willing to provide that funding for its contractors, then you're all good. But if not, then that's down to the council. And the council said, no, we're cutting the costs. This is why we got rid of you. We're not paying you anything. Fuck off. Like, you're on your own. So that's when I started, like, that's when I started doing a lot more self-employed work. I was like, you know, I was left on my own, with some laughable benefit, whatever they give you here, you know, like unemployment benefit, whatever. So I was like, okay, I have to take matters in my own hands now. I'm not going to do the corporate work anymore. I am definitely not doing that, because there is no stability there. So I might as well, you know, if I'm sailing out in the deep waters, I might as well do my own thing, do my podcast, do whatever I got to do, but don't go back there, you know. I don't know why I started talking about this whole thing, but this is where we got.
No, you're good. Yeah, you were sort of going off of just a lot of people financially struggling during this whole thing, but
yes. So yeah,
but
you know, so I had my fair share of struggle also, and I have to say, you know, it has been quite challenging. Okay, I wouldn't say necessarily very difficult. I had support of some really good friends and all that. So you know, I'm doing all right. I know a lot of people who are doing much worse just because they didn't have an opportunity, you know, to do whatever they had to do, or because they had to waste their time doing some meaningless fucking job for God knows how long just to survive, you know, where back before this whole madness, they were doing really, really well. All of a sudden, you know, all of a sudden they're stuck in the, you know, between a rock and a hard place. It's like, you quit this shit job, you are
It's
totally
Instagram's going to cut out in a few seconds, so we'll have to end it here.